Someone discovers your show, and then when they have a problem, they reach out. You didn't push them, they pulled themselves in. That's not how any of this works. A podcast is not a traditional marketing funnel, and it never will be. The reason is trust mechanics. The podcast isn't the conversion tool, it's the trust accelerator that makes every other conversion tool work 10 times better. One of the most common things I hear from business podcasters is this: I'm publishing episodes, I'm building listeners, but I'm not seeing it turn into actual business. And usually when I dig into this, I find the same thing every time. They're thinking about it wrong. They're looking at the podcast like a traditional marketing funnel. Listener comes in the top, client comes out at the bottom, like a vending machine. Put content in, customers come out. But a podcast doesn't work like a landing page or a Facebook ad. It's not a straight line from listener to buyer. It's more like a web. There are multiple paths from your content to revenue. And if you're only watching one of them, the listener to client path, you're missing most of the value your podcast is already generating. Today, I want to show you all the paths, because once you see the full picture, you'll realize your podcast is probably doing more for your business than you think. And you'll also see where you can tighten things up. So let me be really clear about this because it's important. A podcast is not a traditional marketing funnel, and it never will be. The reason is trust mechanics. A Facebook ad works like this. Someone sees your ad, they click, they land on a page, and they either buy or they don't. The whole thing happens in minutes. The conversion is fast because the time commitment is low. You're asking them to click a button. A podcast works completely differently. Someone discovers your show, maybe they listen to one episode, then they come back, then they binge 3 or 4 more, and then over weeks, maybe months, they build a picture of who you are, how you think, and what you value. And then when they have a problem, if it matches what you do, they reach out. You didn't push them, they pulled themselves in. Now that's a fundamentally different mechanism, and it means you can't measure it the same way. You can't say, I published 10 episodes and I got 2 clients, therefore my podcast converts at 20%. That's not how any of this works. But here's the thing that is true, and the research really backs this up. Edison research found that 45% of younger listeners trust brands promoted by podcast hosts because of the relationship they feel with that host. And a study from Acast in 2024 showed that podcast advertising delivers a 5 times return on investments, higher than social media, higher than radio, higher than basically anything else. The trust that podcasting builds is real, it's measurable, it just doesn't show up on a spreadsheet the way a Google ad does. All right, so let's walk through each path. The first one is the one everyone thinks about, listener to client, the classic. Here's how it actually works. Someone discovers your show, they listen, they come back, and over time, they move through the stages from, is this worth my time, to, does this person know their stuff, to, do I trust this person? To eventually, I need what this person offers. And I want to be completely honest with you here. This path on its own is slow. Most podcast-driven leads take 3 to 12 months from first listen to inquiry. That's the realistic timeline. Not 3 weeks, not 1 episode, months. And you know what? That's actually fine. Because that's how trust works in real life too. You don't meet someone at a networking event and then hire them the next day. You see them a few times, you hear them speak, you read some of their stuff, you build confidence, and then when the timing is right, you reach out. A podcast just accelerates that process because the listener is spending 20-25 minutes at a time hearing you think out loud. That's an incredible level of access. But, and then this is the honest bit, your podcast alone probably won't convert a stranger into a listener. What it will do is supercharge everything else in your marketing mix. If someone Googles you before a sales call and finds 50 episodes of you being brilliant on the topic, that call is basically closed before it starts. The podcast isn't the conversion tool. It's the trust accelerator that makes every other conversion tool work 10 times better. Imagine you're a management consultant. Someone finds your podcast through a LinkedIn post. They listen to 3 episodes over the next 2 weeks. Then they see you speak at a conference. Then they get referred to you by a colleague. By the time they book a call with you, they already feel like they know you. The podcast didn't close the deal on its own, but it makes every other touch point exponentially more effective. That's the real power of this path. The second path is the one we covered in detail a couple of episodes ago, and it's honestly the most underrated. Guest to client. You invite someone on your show who fits your ideal client profile. You have a brilliant conversation, you hold a genuine relationship, and over time, that relationship turns into business. Not because you pitched them, because they experienced your expertise firsthand during the interview. And according to a report from Fame in 2024, companies using this strategy are seeing a 68% guest to sales pipeline conversion rate. That's not 60% closing deals on the podcast. It's 68% of guests entering the sales pipeline through a natural relationship progression. That is remarkable. So now think about what that means practically. Imagine you're an IT services company. You invite CTOs of mid-sized companies onto your show to talk about their biggest technology challenges. You're not selling anything. You're giving them a platform. But by the end of a 30-minute conversation about cloud migration headaches and cybersecurity concerns, they know exactly what you do and how well you understand their world. 6 weeks later, when they need to evaluate a new vendor, your name is already in their head, not because of a cold email, because of a conversation. This path is especially powerful for high-ticket B2B services where the sales cycle is long and trust matters enormously. If you're selling something that costs tens of thousands of dollars, the guest-to-client path is arguably more valuable than the listener-to-client path. The third path is where a lot of podcasters leave serious money on the table. It's using the podcast to build owned audiences, your email list, your community, and then converting from those. Here's why this matters. Your podcast audience lives on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You don't own that relationship. If Spotify changes its algorithm tomorrow, you could lose half your listenership overnight. But if you use the podcast to drive people onto your email list or into a private community, now you own that connection. So what does this look like in practice? Let's say you're a business coach who runs a podcast about scaling service businesses. At the end of each episode, instead of saying book a call, you say, I've got a free framework that maps out exactly what I described today. Drop your email at the link in the show notes and I'll send it to you. That's a lead magnet. And now that listener is on your email list. Now you can nurture them and now you can build the relationship off platform on your terms. Or imagine you're a marketing agency and you create a private Slack group or a Facebook group for your listeners. It starts as a community where people share wins and they ask questions. You're in there being helpful, not selling. And over time, when someone in that community needs exactly what you offer, they don't Google marketing agency, they message you directly. Because they already know you. They've been watching you show up and add value for months. The key here is that the podcast creates the initial trust and then the email list or the community maintains and deepens it between episodes. One of the most effective approaches is offering something that's a genuine continuation of the episode's value. Not a generic PDF, something specific. If your episode taught a framework, the lead magnet is the worksheet that lets them apply that framework to their own business. If your episode covered a case study, the lead magnet is the template behind the case study. The more connected it is to what they just heard, the higher the conversion. And here's the beautiful thing. The conversion from email subscriber to client is often much faster than the conversion from listener to client. Because they've already taken an action. They've already said, yes, I want more from this person. That's a fundamentally different level of engagement. All right, I want to be completely straight with you here because there's a lot of podcast hype out there and I don't want to add to it. Your podcast on its own is not going to be a money machine. It's just not. If you publish episodes and do nothing else, no email capture, no guest strategy, no CTAs, no distribution, you'll build a small audience of people who really like you. And that's great. But it won't pay the bills. What a podcast does do, and this is the part that's genuinely transformational, is it makes everything else you do more effective. Your cold outreach lands better because people can Google you and find 50 episodes of credibility. Your sales calls close faster because the prospect already feels like they know you. Your referrals carry more weight because the person referring you can say, listen to their podcast, and you'll see exactly what I mean. Think about how trust works in your own life. Before you hire someone expensive, a lawyer, an accountant, a consultant, you want to feel like you know them a little bit first. You want to hear how they think. You want to see if they really understand your world. A podcast gives people that experience at scale. Every episode is you saying, this is how I think, this is what I know, and this is how I'd approach your problem. That's incredibly powerful. It just takes time. Just like any relationship takes time. The business podcasters who understand this, who treat the podcast as a trust accelerator rather than a direct conversion tool, those are the ones who look back at months 12 and say, I can't believe how much business came from this. The ones who expect results by month 1 or 2, they quit and they miss everything. And the content itself has to be genuinely good. That's a non-negotiable. If your episodes are thinly veiled sales pitches, people will feel it immediately and they'll leave. The content has to stand on its own. It has to be useful even if the listener never buys anything from you. That's the foundation. Value first, always. The business flows naturally from that. So the 3 paths: listener to client, guest to client, community, and email list to client. You don't have to use all 3 at once. Pick the one that fits your business best and build it properly. If you're in a high-ticket B2B, the guest path might be your goldmine. If you're in coaching or education, the email list path might convert faster. If you're building a personal brand, the listener path is probably your long game. But experiment, be flexible, see what works for your audience and for your offer. In the next episode, it's all about metrics, the 5 numbers that actually tell you whether your podcast is working and the ones that you can safely ignore, plus some real industry benchmarks so you know what good actually looks like. It's going to be a bit more data heavy than we've done so far, but I think it's going to be really, really useful for you. If this podcast has made you seriously think about starting or improving a business podcast, go to 7millionbikes.com and book a discovery call with me. No pitch, just a conversation with me about your goals and whether podcasting makes sense for what you're trying to build. Remember, this is Smarter Podcasting. I'm Neil Mackay, the podcast guy. Thanks for listening. Cheers.